He stood serene, poised, clutching only a novel and his boarding pass. Yet to a woman at the gate, his complexion and quiet demeanor triggered a call to security. Moments later, a globally respected UN legal expert found himself in handcuffs, shamed before his flight. Unbeknownst to the officers, he had crafted the very laws they violated. Now, they would face judgment from the man they sought to silence. Dear audience, this isn't merely a tale. It's a profound reflection of resilience and the quest for justice in overlooked corners. If you're new here, I invite you to share your location in the comments below. If stories like this stir, provoke, or inspire you, please subscribe and hit the bell icon. We amplify voices that need to be heard daily. Thank you for joining us. Now, let's dive into the story.
It began with a delay. A 7:15 a.m. flight from London Heathrow to New York was postponed 45 minutes due to fog over the Atlantic. Nothing out of the ordinary. Terminal 5's departure hall hummed softly with boarding announcements and clinking coffee mugs. Amid the crowd, one man stood out, not for causing a stir, but for his stillness. Professor James Carter, 64, waited in the business class line, shoulders at ease, engrossed in a paperback. Tall and impeccably dressed in a navy trench coat and gray slacks, his neatly trimmed salt and pepper beard framed a distinguished yet humble presence. James was no stranger to airports or travel. He delivered over 200 lectures across 4 continents, recently advising on counterterrorism ethics and international law at The Hague. That morning, though, he was just a traveler, calm, composed, unnoticed, or so he thought. He carried a sleek leather carry-on and a black laptop bag over one shoulder. His boarding pass protruded slightly from his coat's inner pocket. His phone rested in his hand, idle. He wasn't browsing. He was studying a court transcript from a Kyiv war crime tribunal, blue ink marking key phrases. His thoughts were elsewhere, but Heathrow had other intentions. Across the terminal lounge, by vast glass windows, Margaret Thompson observed. In her mid-50s, blonde, adorned with diamond studs, she was the sort who memorized the first-class wine list and corrected flight attendants without hesitation. Her husband, Robert, scrolled mindlessly on his phone beside her. Margaret's gaze fixed on James. His tranquility, his lack of bustle among hurried travelers, unsettled her. She leaned toward the gate agent with confident poise and murmured, "That man in the long coat. He seems off. He's watching everyone. Too quiet. Too deliberate." The agent glanced up, puzzled. "He's just in the business class line, ma'am. He passed security like everyone else." "I've traveled enough to trust my instincts," Margaret insisted. "Please report it before it's too late." That was enough. At 7:36 a.m., 2 officers near gate B16 got a radio call. Suspicious male, mid-60s, possibly scoping the area. No clear threat yet. The message hit like doctrine. Deputy Officer Daniel Hayes cracked his knuckles as he stood. Young and self-assured, he trusted his badge, made his instincts flawless. His partner, Officer Thomas Reed, older and more reserved, trailed quietly. They didn't seek further details. They didn't check footage. They didn't know who he was. They didn't care to. James had just stepped forward, passport and ID ready, when he sensed movement behind him. 2 officers flanked him. His hold on his passport remained steady. His eyes didn't waver. He turned to face them, as if he'd anticipated this his whole life. "Sir," Hayes said sharply, "we need to talk." James tilted his head slightly. "Regarding what?" "We've had a complaint," Reed added. "You're unsettling other passengers." James blinked once. I'm simply standing here. We need to inspect your bag, Hayes interrupted. Step aside. Nearby passengers turned. Some discreetly angled their phones to record. A mother drew her toddler closer, uncertain of the supposed danger. James stepped aside slowly, not from fear, but calculation, his mind already noting every detail. I'm Professor James Carter, he said evenly. I advise the UN Human Rights Council and have cleared all required international checks. What am I suspected of? We're here to determine that, Hayes replied, dodging the question. Come with us. Am I under arrest? No, sir, but we need your cooperation. Then I request your badge numbers first. That moment, the calm assertion of rights in a public space, made Hayes stiffen. Authority didn't like being challenged, especially by someone it assumed it could dominate. We're not doing this here, Hayes said, invading James's space. Easy way or hard way? James stood firm. There's only one legal way. With that, cold metal clicked loudly on the marble floor. Gasps echoed through the waiting area. Margaret leaned back, content. Robert, still scrolling, didn't glance up. The gate agent's hand lingered over the phone, unsure whether to call for help. But it was too late. James Carter, esteemed legal scholar, was handcuffed. Not for his actions, but for his appearance, for someone's claim he didn't fit. Hayes gripped his arm tighter than needed as they moved through the terminal. Reed followed, silent, jaw clenched, eyes flicking to the growing crowd. The man they detained hadn't raised his voice, resisted, or even flinched. But they hadn't asked who he was. They hadn't thought to. Before the hour ended, they'd regret it deeply. The corridor to the security office felt colder than Heathrow's main halls, not from air conditioning, but from what it symbolized. A place where dignity was eroded and silence was misread as guilt. Officer Daniel Hayes' grip on James Carter's arm never eased. There was no resistance. There never was. Yet the cuffs remained. James stayed silent as they passed onlookers, pretending not to watch. He didn't ask why this was happening. He knew. Still, knowing didn't dull the moment's weight. It honed it. In a stark, gray room with metal chairs and a buzzing fluorescent light, Hayes shoved the door open with his shoulder. Sit, he commanded. James sat deliberately, slowly. The cuffs dug into his wrists as he settled. Officer Thomas Reed stood in the corner, arms folded, face taut with unease or doubt. The room's silence wasn't hollow. It throbbed with unspoken truth, heavy and dense. Give your name, Hayes snapped, grabbing a clipboard from the wall. You have my ID, James replied, his tone steady, restrained only by control. I asked for your name. James Carter, professor, legal consultant to human rights tribunals, recently retained by the International Criminal Court in The Hague. Hayes didn't look up. He jotted something, muttering, possible alias, under his breath. Reed's eyes lifted, lingering. Something shifted in his expression. Recognition, maybe, or realization they hadn't done the basic step. Verify. What's the reason for my detention? James pressed, his calm a subtle rebuke, a complaint, suspicious activity. You were watching people's bags, Hayes said, grabbing a tablet. We'll check footage soon. Did you know I cleared passport control and TSA without issues? That's irrelevant, Hayes dismissed. The report came after. Based on whose judgment of suspicion? You're acting defensive, sir, Hayes said, eyes narrowing. Looks guilty. Guilty of what? James asked quietly. Reading quietly? Reed shifted, arms unfolding, hands fidgeting near his vest. Not for a weapon, but from nerves. James noticed, catalogued it. In court, that would have been a crack. Here, it hinted at unease beneath the surface. Doubt. Hayes leaned closer. Want to play word games, Professor? Fine, but I asked the questions here. That, James said, eyes rising with intent, is precisely the issue. It hit, not loudly, not theatrically, but like the opening of a trial no one knew was underway. Meanwhile, the airport buzzed outside. A teen's video of James's arrest, captioned, "Is this security now?" was gaining steam. In 20 minutes, it had 15,000 views. Comments clashed, but the footage spoke clearly. An older black man in a long coat, handcuffed, silent, calm, surrounded, humiliated. In the security room, silence stretched. Reed finally spoke. "Maybe we should recheck his documents." Hayes ignored him. Reed stepped forward, took James's ID from the evidence tray and scanned it. The screen flashed, confirming instantly. UK residency, UN ID tag, international legal credentials verified. "Sir," Reed said cautiously, "his ID's legit. He's who he claims." Hayes grabbed the ID. "We'll confirm through official channels. We're not finished." "No," James said, raising his cuffed wrists to the table. "You are." His voice wasn't angry. It was unyielding, rooted, the voice that had grilled warlords and addressed parliaments. Hayes stared, suddenly unsure of his authority. A knock sounded. Not an officer, but a man in a black overcoat, holding a silver badge to the glass. Reed opened the door. "Can I help you?" No pause. "Agent Michael Bennett, International Legal Oversight Division. You're holding a UN-affiliated legal officer without grounds or jurisdiction." "This stops now." Hayes stepped up. "We're conducting an investigation." "You're conducting an illegal detention," Bennett cut in. "The U.S. Consulate, Interpol, and the Hague's Oversight Desk have contacted us. You're detaining a man who trains judges on the Geneva Conventions." The room fell silent, icy. Bennett faced James. "We've verified your identity, and will escort you under international protocol. Do you need medical attention?" "No," James said, "but I need documentation. A full report, badge numbers, and these," he raised his wrists, "removed now." Reed moved first, hands shaking slightly as he unlocked the cuffs. "I'm sorry, sir." James met his eyes. "You didn't ask, but now you know. What you do next matters more." Hayes stood still. Bennett turned to him. "Internal Affairs will contact you. I suggest you get a lawyer." No one else spoke. As James rose, he didn't adjust his coat with anger. He didn't glance back in fury. He walked out with the same steady authority he'd entered with. Now, the world was watching. His silence wasn't submission. It was strategy. The security checkpoint resumed its rhythm. Flashing scanners, casual chatter, luggage wheels on polished linoleum. To an outsider, Heathrow had moved on. But near Gate 19, something had fractured. In the operations room, Agent Michael Bennett stood tall, gaze firm. A single unopened file lay before him. Behind him, 3 officers stood frozen. 2 uniformed, 1 in a suit. Their faces mixed confusion and dread, but none seemed more shaken than Officer Daniel Hayes. He hadn't spoken since uncuffing James Carter. He didn't need to. Silence spoke volumes. Not guilt yet, but disbelief that his power could be challenged, his assumptions undone so swiftly. That disbelief faced its reckoning. Bennett opened the file slowly, the paper's rustle louder than any alarm. "Let's review the facts," he said, voice calm but cutting. "You stopped a man with no record, no suspicious items, and a valid ticket, based only on one woman's vague concern." "He was eyeing bags," Hayes blurted. "Sitting with his own luggage?" Bennett asked, tone steady. Hayes swallowed. "We checked the footage," Bennett continued. "Every angle, terminal cams, gate feeds, no circling, no odd behavior. He didn't leave his seat for over 30 minutes. The room stayed quiet. Bennett laid a photo on the table. James Carter before the UN emblem, flanked by judges and diplomats. The caption read, lead legal counsel to the International Commission on Human Rights. A 1-minute ID check would have shown this, Bennett said. Instead, you cuffed a man who's drafted constitutional frameworks for over 10 nations. Reed shifted uneasily. I didn't know he was. That's the issue, Bennett interrupted. You didn't ask. You assumed. You acted. Then the door opened. Another agent handed Bennett a tablet. The video's viral, sir. 500,000 views in an hour. Major outlets are covering it. Bennett showed the screen to Hayes and Reed. The thumbnail. James in his gray coat, flanked by officers. Not resisting. Not shouting. Just waiting. The headline, Human rights expert wrongfully detained at Heathrow, captured on video. Outside, passengers uploaded clearer footage. Witnesses tagged journalists. James's name trended, not as a victim, but a warning. Accountability was taking shape across the terminal floor, and people noticed. At the gate, Margaret Thompson sat by the window, watching planes. Her costly scarf hugged her shoulders, her eyes flicking to the crowd more than the runway. She hadn't expected this escalation, hadn't thought the man mattered. She just wanted him gone. Until now. Her phone buzzed. A friend sent a link. She tapped it and froze. There was James Carter. Credentials, affiliations, a TED Talk clip from a month ago on racial profiling in European transit hubs. The irony churned her stomach. Murmurs spread. A teen pointed her way. A woman by the counter whispered to her child. Margaret sank into her seat, but she knew what was coming. The stairs were turning to her. Upstairs, a journalist drafted a story. The cost of a whisper. How one woman's unease sparked a diplomatic crisis. The words were sharp and true. Downstairs, Bennett faced James again, now before staff and 2 airport legal reps. Mr. Carter, do you want to make a public statement? James rose slowly, posture erect, eyes clear. Not yet, he said. There's something more vital than my words. What's that, sir? A legal rep asked. That you listen, James replied. Not just to me, but to how your system permitted this, enabled it, and unless it changes, it won't be the last time. The silence was instant, not empty, but a resigned agreement. Bennett raised his voice slightly. For the record, he said to the officers, this is James Carter, UN legal advisor, international law professor, and Global Human Rights Medal recipient. Hayes exhaled heavily. Reed sat down. James turned to the exit. No one stopped him. No one blocked him. Cameras followed, not for drama, but for accountability. As he stepped into the terminal's light, everything shifted. It wasn't just a name now. It was a message, heard globally. The room was sterile, its beige walls failing to comfort. At the conference table's end sat James Carter, wrists free but marked by cuff memories. Opposite him were 5 officials, 2 from the Crown Prosecution Service, 1 from the Metropolitan Police Oversight Board, 2 from the International Civil Liberties Alliance. The air hummed with unspoken weight, too heavy to ignore. James didn't pace or dramatize. He sat upright, poised, eyes keen. He'd spent years weaving legal systems, untangling government accountability worldwide. He never imagined his deepest rights violation would occur on British soil by a boarding gate, recounted as a case study before stunned officials. This wasn't about personal healing. It was about systemic reform. He spoke, not with anger, but with surgical precision, detailing the false complaint, unverified suspicion, and the moment steel touched his skin. His voice stayed steady, never rising, each word slicing the silence. This wasn't a mistake, he said. It was a flawed system, upheld by routine. Elizabeth Grant, a former barrister, leaned in. You're saying the officers weren't alone in this? They acted with a system's full backing, one that didn't demand better questions, James replied. They were trained to fear shadows, not confirm facts. In the next room, behind glass, ethics auditors scribbled frantically. This wasn't testimony, it was diagnosis. James wasn't pointing fingers. He was charting a path out of decay. The video had gone global. His name was a headline. Politicians commented. Editorials called for reform. But while the public raged, James strategized, refusing to let this fade as a viral blip. He aimed for a turning point. From his jacket, he pulled a slim leather folder. Inside, the Transit Justice Initiative, a plan for holding transport law enforcement accountable with federal civil liberties reviews, independent audits, transparent escalation logs, and annual anti-bias training. He passed copies across the table. "I drafted this on my flight home," he said. "This isn't just a reaction. It's a model for prevention." The silence wasn't doubtful. It was stunned. No one expected the man cuffed at Gate 19 to return with legislation. No one foresaw the quiet figure in the video, who didn't resist or yell, crafting Heathrow's boldest civil oversight model. Elsewhere, officers Daniel Hayes and Thomas Reed sat in separate interview rooms, uniforms gone, decisions weight lingering. Hayes stared at a printed viral photo. James, calm, cuffed, dignity intact. Something broke in him. He'd trusted his instincts. Now, that trust choked him. An ethics investigator leaned forward. "Officer Hayes, what did you know about Mr. Carter when you approached him?" "Nothing," Hayes said, voice rough. "Just the woman's claim?" "She said he seemed off." "Off?" the investigator echoed, circling the word. "I didn't think I needed to question it," Hayes said. "That's the issue," the investigator replied. In the conference room, James answered questions, not about his feelings, but about fixing the broken system. "What would you change in that terminal's security?" an official asked. "I'd create decision checkpoints, not just luggage ones," James said. "Every complaint-based action needs a documented validation chain. Was it corroborated? Was the person approached respectfully? Was escalation premature?" He didn't oppose caution. He demanded accountability. His proposal, now circulating departments, outlined public dashboards, encrypted rights monitoring logs, and 30-day complaint outcome access for citizens. It was bold, costly, disruptive, exactly what was needed. That night, James returned to his hotel overlooking the Thames. London's lights glimmered below, the city moving on. But his phone buzzed with life. Emails, invitations, thanks. Victims of profiling without cameras, law students citing his video, retired judges offering pro bono help. He opened his laptop, adding a final clause to his proposal. Personnel conducting unverified searches or detentions face immediate suspension pending review. Then he wrote a line later quoted in Parliament. "We can't fix what we don't record. We can't rebuild trust in silence." The storm from Gate 19 had reached legislation, not through anger or vengeance, but resolve. Accountability's blueprint, James knew, wasn't born in courts or screens. It began in quiet rooms, with hard truths and courage to demand better. He was only beginning. The courthouse sky was ash gray, lingering with the scent of something burned out. People gathered outside, not protesting, but reflecting. No chants, no signs, just stories shared about James Carter, who'd walked through Edwards Airport weeks prior with a coat, a briefcase, and a name that shook systemic silence. This wasn't just James's story anymore. The incident had sparked something beyond the terminal's marble floors. Not fury, not revenge, but resolve. Since the video went viral, James spoke to the press once, not on a stage, but in a University of Toronto classroom, lecturing law students whose eyes gleamed with injustice-fueled passion. He didn't dwell on the cuff's bruises or humiliation. He spoke of systems, decay, and what happens when protection presumes guilt. The question, he said softly, is not if the law is blind, but if its enforcers ever learned to see. That line appeared in journals, on signs, even tattooed on an Atlanta public defender's arm. But James didn't chase sound bites. He built something enduring, louder than cuffs, longer than news cycles. He founded the Carter Center for Public Accountability, a legal, media, and policy group using data-driven advocacy and litigation to hold institutions accountable. It wasn't glamorous. It didn't chase viral fame. It delivered impact. In 6 months, it launched 4 investigations into transit hub profiling, overturned 2 deportations, and proposed mandatory complaint oversight laws in 5 nations. More quietly, it platformed untold stories. The Silenced Records Archive collected civilian accounts of wrongful profiling, detentions, or stops for their name, skin, or silence. Its tagline, "We remember loudly." James's days changed. He didn't testify in courts, but trained those who would. He didn't negotiate legal terms behind doors. He spoke to thousands in civic halls, churches, community centers, turning law into armor for everyday people. His calm, once mistaken for threat, became his strength's core. The world saw a black man arrested without cause. It remembered a black man who didn't waver, faced power with grace, and never lowered his voice to be heard. Officer Daniel Hayes and his partner were sentenced, the system moving slowly but publicly. Margaret Thompson, whose whisper started it, faced her reckoning, not in jail, but in the collapse of her assumed power. Her name became a question. What did you see? And what did it cost? The cost was legacy. James Carter didn't just endure that airport. He reshaped what follows. That's a name no one will forget. James Carter never entered that airport to make history. He carried no flags, issued no challenges, spoke no louder than needed. He sought a quiet flight and the dignity to move unjudged. But the system saw only his skin, his calm, its own shadows. Fear turned to whispers, whispers to suspicion, suspicion to escalation, escalation to cuffs. Yet, through every wrong step, James held firm. He didn't yell or beg. He stood in truth, forcing truth to emerge. When the world learned James was a civil liberties strategist, human rights scholar, and former federal commissioner, it faced a harsh truth. If this could happen to him, with his visibility and access, what happens daily to those without? That question sparked a cry. The cry became a movement. But James didn't seek vengeance or fame. He channeled outrage into impact. Through the Carter Center, he lifted buried stories. He didn't just seek justice. He built a system for others to find it. From airport rules to complaint processes, digital stories to legal training, James turned violation into reform. His legacy isn't a video or verdict. It's resilience's ripple. One quiet defiance sparking thousands across borders and beliefs. What's the lesson for us watching, reading, remembering? Dignity isn't earned by titles or deeds. It's a birthright we must guard fiercely. In a world quick to judge and slow to listen, we all have a role. Sometimes it's recording wrong. Sometimes it's asking, what if it were me? But James's deepest lesson isn't just injustice, it's response. How we act when misunderstood, profiled, cornered. James showed you don't need to shout to be heard. You stand, in knowledge, in grace, in the belief that silence isn't surrender, and calm isn't weakness. Let his story be more than outrage. Let it be a mirror, map, mandate. If it moved you, made you pause or feel deeply, don't let it fade. Subscribe, not just for storytellers, but for stories that unsettle and improve us. The fight for justice isn't won in headlines. It's won in hearts. It starts here, now, with us. Ensure no story like James Carter's is buried again. Subscribe, share, speak. Let the next story be heard because you made it so.